people see cars as a status symbol, but it is all nonsense. If you lose these things, which is very possible, you know, so you're going to be nothing, aren't you? Hello, I'm Marcus Hayes and welcome to another episode of Rant on Road. Because everyone loves a rant, as always, let me know in the comments what you feel like ranting about at the moment. But in this video, I want to rant about how much people see cars as a status symbol. It's fair to say that we live in a very materialistic world, where most people are more bothered about collecting material things that they can display than they are bothered about who they are as a person. And I know that social media makes this worse, right? Everyone wants to look good on their Instagram. Everyone wants to show off that they've got, you know, nice clothes, nice watch, or a nice car, for instance. And look, a car is a very expensive item. It's going to be probably the second most expensive thing that you ever buy in your life. The first most expensive thing that you'll ever buy in your life for most people that can't afford to end up owning their own home, etc. So it's inevitable that the car, you know, this expensive asset, if you like, although it's a liability really, that you're seen in on a day-to-day basis that costs a lot of money. No, it's inevitable that this has become a bit of a status symbol. You know, if you see someone in a expensive car, you automatically assume that they're doing well, that they've got loads of money in their pocket. Whereas if you see someone driving around in an old banger, you know, an old rickety banger that looks like it's on its last legs, you instantly assume that that guy isn't doing so well in life. You know, maybe that guy is very low paid, even to the point where you assume that someone that's got an old car is more lazy than someone that's got a nice car, right? So a car is a real main status symbol when it comes to us, you know, getting our first impression of people. Now, I think that this sort of harks back to, you know, when we were in caveman times, right? Because ultimately your status, if you boil it down, is all about making yourself more attractive, like as a man, to a woman, right? Making yourself more attractive to the opposite sex so that they want you to be the person that helps them reproduce, right? And it's a survival thing, because the better you are, you know, genetically, then the better your offspring are going to be, etc., etc. So if you boil it down to a primitive level, ultimately status, you know, the status that we sort of seek in the modern world all boils down to when we were more primitive and we were trying to display our worthiness to reproduce, right, to females, essentially, right? In caveman times, if you were more assertive, if you were more adventurous, then you would come across as, again, a better mate to reproduce with. You know, if you're a man and you're able to display confidence and display adventurousness, then that would mean that you're more able to go out and hunt and provide for your family, right? So, you know, it's not really down to monetary value. It's just that we now live in a world that is revolved around money, right? So I understand why, you know, status is an important thing. You know, being able to display your wealth is an important thing. It's just that it means a very different thing in the modern world than where I think it originated from, right? And, you know, a car is an expensive thing. It is a thing that, again, you drive around in every day, so you're kind of displaying. And yeah, it's just got to the point where people really attach so much value to the car that you drive. And it works both ways, right? Because a lot of people will seek some sort of value within themselves by striving to buy an expensive car, right? And then a lot of people will, as I've already mentioned in this video, look at other people and attach value or lack thereof by what car they're driving, right? And with me being a classic car owner, obviously I'm not in a classic car now, this is my girlfriend's car, but, you know, with me being a classic car owner, it's kind of weird how, and it kind of proves the point that it is all nonsense and it is all just perception, right, in terms of how other people see you, in terms of your status, with regards to the car you're driving, right? Because, you know, if I'm driving around in Esther, my Mark 1 Escort, which is a really old car, you know, it's 50 years old, but it looks pretty mint, you know. We built it with the view to making it look absolutely brand new. You know, I've been driving it for a few years now, so it's getting a bit tatty around the edges, but, you know, only if you look really close. So it's a 50-year-old car, but it looks absolutely mint, right? So it's funny because people that are in the scene, or people that are remotely into cars, will look at Esther and be like, wow, look at that, you know. And they might sort of assume that I'm doing really well in life and I've got bundles of money, like, because I'm driving this car that they can sort of identify would cost a lot of money to buy or to build, in my case, right? And I know the prices of classic cars have gone down a little bit recently, but, you know, it's still worth a considerable chunk of money, right? So a lot of people would, you know, maybe remember when they had those cars back in the day and, you know, sort of negatively think how they can't afford one today, etc., etc. Or maybe people that have owned them in the day when they were worth less, they were sort of, you know, you hear stories a lot where people have sold them and now they regret how, like, selling them because they're worth so much money now. So essentially, to a certain proportion of the population, if you like, Esther, if they see me driving Esther, I would come across as someone who's doing really well, who's got a load of money, right? Whereas on the other hand, someone who isn't into classic cars at all, you know, maybe they're not into cars at all, you know, the kind of person that just gets a brand new car on finance, they might assume that, oh, look at that guy, that poor guy driving around in a 50-year-old car. You know, all right, it's a sort of a nice example of one, but, you know, they're driving that car because they can't afford a new one, right?
I just had to jump in here because a better example of what I was just saying is with Maud. You know, she looks like absolute junk. And when I used to drive her to my old day job, certain people that weren't in the scene at all, you know, weren't into classic Fords at all, were really surprised when I sort of mentioned how much she could be worth, because, you know, she looks like utter junk, but was still, you know, worth a good few £1,000s, you know, before she sort of started going as rusty as she is now. And there was a few times where people noticed that I wasn't driving Maud to work. You know, I might have been using Kat's car or whatever, you know, times where there was something wrong with her or whatever, and then people just assumed that I'd scrapped the car. Like, oh, you finally scrapped it, too far gone, was it? Like, not realising that, these cars don't get scrapped because they're worth a considerable amount of money. They're always worth something, even if it is for parts and stuff. So, yeah, I thought Maud was a better example of, you know, people sort of assuming that you're really, really poor because you're driving around in an old school Ford.
So it just proves how, like, nonsense attaching, you know, your status or attaching perceived wealth to someone's car is, because the same car with the same person can look, you know, completely opposite end of the spectrum in terms of your status and your wealth, based on the perception of whoever's viewing me in that car, right? And it works the same with modern cars as well, right? Because look, cars are expensive. Most people that are driving around in a brand new car have them on finance, and it's not to do with how much wealth you've got either, because people who have got a lot of wealth, they won't go and drop hundreds of thousands of pounds on a car to buy it outright, say, you know, your really luxury cars, because they're living a life where putting 100,000 or, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds into a car would be a waste of money when they can just get that car on finance, maybe drop tens of thousands on a deposit, get it on finance, and then they can use those hundreds of thousands of pounds that they would have spent on that car to start a business or to put into businesses that they've already got, which will then generate them profit. So, you know, and it might pay for the car or pay towards the car. So again, a modern car isn't necessarily a sign of how wealthy someone is either, because the ultra rich people will still get their cars on finance. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you'll see many people that will essentially get cars on finance, you know, not your supercars, just your nice new cars. they'll get cars on finance that they can't really afford, or they can barely afford. So, you know, they might be driving around in a nice car, and, you know, to members of the opposite sex or to people in general, they might look like they're doing really well and they've got bundles of money. But ultimately, if their finance agreement is making them skint, then, well, the opposite is true, isn't it? And it's mad, really, if you think back to what I said at the beginning of this video, my theory of where this desire to accumulate things to display, to show status comes from. If you think about it, if at our core, the reason that people say get cars on finance that they can't actually afford to present in a way to attract the opposite sex, which, you know, is, you know, at our core, at a primitive level, a way of displaying how worthy we are of reproducing, then it's kind of like round the wrong way, isn't it? Because if you imagine, you know, in very simplistic terms, if a woman decides to reproduce with a guy because they've got a really expensive car, and all this is subliminal, right? It's like, as I say, it's like primitive, like, reasons why we have these like modern ways of thinking, right? But just bear with me. So a woman decides to reproduce with a man because he's got a really expensive car, but then they have kids, and they can't really afford to feed the kid as well because matey's got to pay 500 quid a month on his car finance. Then yeah, it kind of goes against what these sort of urges originate from on a primitive level, if that makes sense. But yeah, I sort of live a life nowadays where I try my best. I say try my best, it's not even difficult anymore because I've been striving to think this way for many years, right? But I try not to fall into the trap of, you know, thinking that all my problems are going to be solved by how I look to other people. And, you know, it's kind of counterproductive because I'm on social media, right? So social media is about coming across in a certain way, but, you know, maybe because I am sort of sticking to my core beliefs and, you know, doing what I want and living how I want, maybe that's why I'm not as big as I could be, who knows? But, you know, I am who I am. So, you know, I've had people say to me before, like, oh, you're so lucky, like, driving a Mark 1 Escort, like, what does it feel like driving down the road and having everyone turn around and point and whatnot? And it's got to the point where, like, I don't even notice anymore, because over the years I've sort of purposely not allowed myself to go down that sort of path in terms of how I'm thinking, because it's not a good place to be in mentally. Like, it's not good to be driving down the road in a really nice car looking out for everyone who's looking at your really nice car. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy the fact that other people enjoy seeing the cars on the road, right? And I feel very lucky that I'm able to be the guy that is driving these cars. You know, I really like them. I like working on them. I like owning them. I like modifying them. I like driving them, right? But I don't attach any sort of status to it. You know, nowadays, and this is the way I kind of try and explain it, I don't really see owning and driving the cars as fun, even though they are. I just see them as a byproduct of being a guy that produces content based around me owning those cars. You know, so I sort of attach them to work. And those of you that watch my on-track videos on my other channel will know that I kind of think that as a man, your main priority should be work. Your main priority shouldn't be fun. It shouldn't be, you know, how you look to other people. It should be work. And I believe that as a man, if you focus on work and focus on being the best human being that you can, you'll inevitably end up having fun, and you'll inevitably end up being happy, and you'll inevitably end up being, you know, someone who people find attractive, you know, whether that be in a sense of the opposite sex, or whether that be in the sense of, you know, someone that people want to associate with, right? So I sort of focus on the work, and then I feel that everything else comes as a byproduct. And that kind of ties into what I'm saying with the cars. You know, I don't allow myself to think that I am in any way made a better person or, you know, gaining any status out of, you know, happening to be able to, you know, be in a position to drive around in a classic car that's worth X amount, right? And look, to be honest, for years and years and years and years, whilst Esther, my Mark 1 Escort, was a bare shell, and whilst I wasn't really focusing enough on working on it, you know, not as much as I could have, you know, that car took me, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years or so to get on the road. You know, during those years, I was in a cycle mentally where I was just assuming that once this car was on the road, it was going to solve everything. I would spend hours every day imagining how cool I was going to look driving down the road in this Mark 1 Escort that I'd been dreaming about for years. You know, I sort of imagined how good it was going to make me feel. I imagined how other people were going to think that I was somehow a better person for driving this car, right? But, you know, luckily, by the time I'd got the car on the road, I'd, you know, grown up a bit because it took so long to build, right? I'd grown up a bit, and yeah, I'm just glad that I don't think like that now, because yeah, a lot of people in the world do, you know, whether it be having a Rolex on your wrist, whether it be, you know, wearing expensive clothes, or whether it be driving a really expensive car. A lot of people attach such value to material goods, whilst at the same time not really focusing at all on the kind of person they are, right? And then ultimately, if you lose these things, which, you know, is very possible, you know, tomorrow I could, you know, something could happen and I could lose everything. I could lose my cars. Then what? Well, then I'm still going to be who I am, you know, which is someone that focuses on a daily basis on turning myself into the best human being that I can. I just won't have these old cars anymore. Like, it's not going to make a massive difference. Whereas if who you are as an actual person is nothing, but you've got all these really cool things, well, when you lose those cool things, you're going to be nothing, aren't you? And I think the irony of it is that if you are focused on improving yourself as a human being rather than just trying to accumulate loads of stuff, then, well, you're more likely to not lose everything, aren't you? Because if you're a better sort of human being, you're trying to progress in life, then, you know, in theory, you're going to be more financially secure, and hopefully you won't be in a position where you do lose everything. So again, it's one of those things where if you sort of focus just on accumulating stuff to make yourself feel better, well, you might end up sort of, without realising it, losing everything and then being left as a nobody. Whereas if you sort of focus on working hard, being the best person that you can, and yes, accumulating things and, you know, enjoying your life, then it's more likely that you're going to continue to enjoy your life and, you know, reap the rewards of living a life where you are trying to be the best person that you can be. So what I'd say is, try and identify where you are attaching too much value and basing too much status within yourself on your material goods, right? It's okay to want to buy material goods. That's not the point. It's how you identify with them, right? You know, identify where you are sort of hanging too much value on the things that you own, right? And if that is the case, then yeah, just acknowledge it and maybe put a little bit more focus into who you are as a person whilst still enjoying to own those material things, right? And if you do catch yourself assuming that other people are really rich because they're driving a really nice car, or at the other end of the spectrum, assuming that someone is really poor or really lazy because they're not driving an expensive car, then yeah, acknowledge when you're doing that as well, because, you know, you want to live a life where you are taking people for who they are, not for what they've accumulated in terms of material goods. So let me know in the comments any examples of where you guys have made the mistake of purchasing something that, you know, you didn't need or you couldn't afford, including cars, and you kind of assumed that it was going to be more of a benefit to you than it actually was. Let me know in the comments any stories you've got like that, where, you know, you was kind of negatively surprised by how much a material good didn't improve things the way that you thought it was. And also, let me know in the comments any examples you've got of where you misinterpreted someone else based on material goods and then sort of were surprised when you found out who they actually were as a person, in terms of it being the complete opposite to what you expected. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this rant on road. I haven't really gone on a mad rant, but you know, these videos are just a bit of fun, just a chance for me to put out some different content, switch things up a bit, you know, keep things a bit varied, and it's a chance for me to ask you guys what you feel like ranting about. So do let me know in the comments if you've got anything that you want me to rant about in a future rant on road. And don't forget, it doesn't have to be about cars, you know, it can be anything, and maybe we'll have a rant about some of your suggestions in the future. But other than that, massive thanks as always to everyone who's tuned in. Do click subscribe if you're new to the channel. Check the links in the description to follow me on social media. I'll leave a link to my website down there as well for any of you guys that want to grab some official Marcus Hayes merchandise. Oh, we've just started doing kids clothing as well, so definitely go and check out those new products. I'll leave a link to the Petrolhead Star website in the description as well, which is my other company that supplies car themed clothing and products. We've actually just started listing kids clothing on there as well. Other than that, I'll leave my email address in the description for anyone who wants to contact me. Huge thanks, as always, to my patrons for your ongoing support. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.